middle of the night, I hear a gunshot.
Oh.
And so I wake up, like I sit bolt upright in bed, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this dude just killed himself in the middle of Alaska, and no one's going to be here for 9 days. This is a 10-day hunt. We've only got 1 day down. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I am sick to my stomach. Like I'm shaking. And so I yell, Richard. I'm like, Richard. Nothing. And I'm like, oh my heck. I'm like, I don't even know what to do. Like, what do I do? So I get up and I get dressed and I get my flashlight and I go outside and I go over to his tent and I'm like, Richard. Nothing. Like he's not answering. And he's shooting a 300 Win Mag. And so I walk around the tent and there's no holes in the tent and there's no blood on the tent. And so I'm like, what in the heck? Like, where did he shoot himself that it didn't blow the tent up too?
Welcome to the podcast. Today I am accompanied, this is Jason Hershey, and today I'm accompanied by my co-host River Skinner.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest, a dear friend of mine, dear friend of River's, and me and River's partner and our boss. So Mr. Tyrell.
Definitely
Tyrell
not
Gray.
the boss. I am the lowest on the totem pole here, for sure. Looks, strength, all of it.
I don't know about that, but I love your humility.
Thanks for having me out, man.
Yeah, thank
Super
you.
Excited.
Glad that we were able to make it work out while you're in town. So
Yeah, no, this is a big deal. You guys are like legit. Look at you, all professional.
you don't see me like this very often, do
No,
you?
not very often. I like it.
For everything.
Oh man, here we go. Well, Tyrell, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What stories do you got for us?
Oh, man. I got a million
I'm off to a bad start.
I think
There's so many places I could go with you that I'm.
One thing I think that's cool about Tyrell. So the way I got recruited, Jason recruited me to a company called Local Voice.
Oh, yeah. Back in the day. That's forever ago.
That's where I met Jason, actually. So I meet this guy. He takes me to McDonald's, recruits me, doesn't even buy me like anything.
No big deal.
McDonald's.
It was.
And
I was early in my career. I didn't realize. I think I was broke also. So
I was the easiest recruit, but it was basically Local Voice was a company that would just do door-to-door surveys. And I didn't know you at the time, but you were an investor into Local Voice.
I was the dumb money behind that. That company does not exist.
That's where I'm going to get to. So that's where I met Jason. I actually met you one time. You made the money. But I'm like the reason why that company doesn't exist. So like Local Voice would do.
The truth is out.
Local Voice would do like surveys for people, or like surveys door to door, and the idea was they would get leads and sell the leads to companies. Well, I don't know if it was you or if it was the other owner, Brad, that got the contract with Google. And so we
Google Fiber in Provo.
Yeah.
Google Fiber. We were the first people to go knock for Google Fiber. And I'm like 18 years old and I'm making $600 a week. And I think I'm like God's gift to earth. So like my ego is like so big. And so somebody tested me on the doors to test my ego and I let them have it. And like 12 hours later, we lost Google. And so, so I basically ruined Tyrell's investment.
And that was the end of it.
That was basically the beginning of the end for Local Voice. So 10 years later, Tyrell's chosen to trust me with another door-to-door company. He's in. So it shows you that Tyrell's forgiving.
And
he's never brought it up once. I was like, actually, I don't know if he remembers that.
So funny. I totally forgot that story.
Oh,
Forgive
man.
and forget.
So funny.
So maybe this conversation will be different after the podcast.
You know
Let's revisit our agreement.
You know what's funny?
You owe me $50,000.
Like, honestly, think about the times in your life where you've had an obstacle or a failure, and it ended up being the biggest blessing for you. Like, honestly, think about it. If we had stuck with Local Voice, that company was never going anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, it never would have made any of us any money.
Yeah.
And so, honestly, fortunately for you, we got rid of that stupid thing and moved on to bigger and better.
Well, you're welcome.
Thank
I just
you.
accelerated the
See,
process.
I just owe you.
You're welcome.
I owe you money.
It's the least I can do for you.
That's been a huge thought I've had over especially the last year since we've all worked together and been building the solar business together. But it's crazy to me. You know, I think there was the opportunity that we could have all worked together and that relationship really just could have fizzled like a lot of relationship fizzles. And I think for whatever reason, Tyrell put effort into reaching out to me and not all, I mean, we didn't talk every day or anything, but it was just like every so often he'd reach out, we'd talk for an hour and catch up, and then nothing would really come of it. And I feel like he, especially in the beginning, kept the relationship going. And then, the opportunity came for us all to kind of partner back up. And it's
been
crazy to me how differently my life could be and all of our lives could be if that relationship wasn't kept. And I see you doing that with so many people.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, honestly, sorry to get on a soapbox here, but I think relationships to me, like that's one of my core values. And I think it's so important to make sure you never know what relationships are going to affect you or affect your kids or affect your family down the road. And I don't know, at the end of the day, for me, I just want to see everybody succeed. And I saw something in you the first time I ever worked with you that I was like, God, I want to work with this guy. Like I'm getting, because you never know. I'm like, let's just keep in touch. And if something ever works out, like I want to work with Jason. And fortunately, like what we do now has been amazing because of you two.
Well, the crazy part is that story connects in so many places because we were at Local Voice. That whole thing happened. We had our falling out I had a falling out with Brad for sure. Cause I stayed more loyal to River, I think, than I did Brad, which has been a theme in my life over the years.
Yeah. Huge.
And then you actually are the person that recruited me, or at least opened the door
I gotta apologize
to Blue Raven.
Sorry about that.
No, to Blue Raven.
I just teased.
No, there's nothing. That's what really launched my career.
Yeah.
Blue Raven was some of the best years of my life, working with those guys and learning from them.
Guys. Yep.
And then you went on shortly after you brought me over there and went on to do some different stuff, and then we've reconnected again. So it's like, man, like realistically, I look at my career and I'm like, I'm sure I'd still be doing fine.
Oh, for sure.
But I do think you've played a huge success.
Well,
So
I'm gonna take credit.
yeah, take all the credit. I mean, I don't know where I would be. So
you
might
would be
might
totally
still be
fine
working for
sure.
Jake Kilgore.
Oh. No, you both would do good. You guys both naturally just have it for sure. But I'm glad to be a small part.
Well, we
sure.
appreciate that. So, I mean, what obviously you're the most wisest, oldest, most mature fella in the room. So
definitely not.
How did your career get started? I mean, what did you?
Man, great question. So, and like what we were just kind of talking about, failing forward, honestly. So I went to Utah State to college, and I had the opposite of the typical college career. I was there to get a degree. I actually went on a scholarship, an athletic scholarship, and that athletic scholarship was gone after the first year. They killed that program. And so then I just had to pay for it myself. And so I ran into my cousin. He was doing flooring. And so we started, the first company I ever actually owned was a flooring company. So we did carpet and tile and laminate and vinyl, VCT, whatever. We would sell it and would install it. Well, when I graduated from college, in my mind, I'm like, I got to use these degrees. I was there for 3 years. I got 3 degrees, finance, economics, and business management. I'm like, I got to get a job. So I started working for a company called Beneficial Finance, who no longer exists anymore. They would do high-risk mortgage loans, essentially. They would collapse everybody's debt into one, refinance on their mortgage, and do a crazy rate. And once I was in, probably like 3 months in, 4 months in, I hated it because I didn't feel comfortable with it. I felt like we were being unethical. I felt like it was a dishonest business model, why the company doesn't exist anymore. They were backed by HSBC, which at the time was the 3rd largest bank in the entire world. And it was just risky, nasty lending, and I hated it. I can remember I was pulling into a McDonald's parking lot, and one of my clients was pulling in at the same time, and I hurried and drove off because I didn't want her to see me. And I just realized, you know what? I'm not living my life like this. Like, I don't want to be in a business where I feel like that. And so I literally went in and talked to my boss and quit that day. And I can remember thinking, like, I am an idiot. Like, I'm getting paid a ton of money, especially as a young kid. I was 23 years old. I was getting ridiculous amounts, 6 figures. I was making a ton. I was their highest guy, and I hated it. And so I walked out. Well, now I knew 2 things. I knew flooring, and I knew mortgages. That's all I knew. And I can remember my grandpa was this big cowboy. He's a big cowboy philosopher, and he'd always hold his hand up to his neck, and he'd be like, son, he's like, smart people work from here up, dumb people work from here down. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to work from the shoulders up. Like, I'm going to use my brain. And so I talked a guy I knew into giving me some money, and we started a mortgage company. And I just started selling loans. And it was probably one of the biggest springboards for me in my life because I was in real estate every day, and I'm a real estate fanatic. I love it. I've always liked it. I remember when I graduated from college, I'd bought a little condo. And when I graduated from college, I sold that condo, and I made $70,000 on that first real estate project. And I can remember thinking what you just talked about, River. I was like, man, I'm king of the world. I'm Donald Trump. I am done. I just made 70 grand and I was stoked. And so it always kind of stuck with me. So when I got into mortgages, I was flipping homes on the side and I learned the real estate business so well. And back then, now the truth in lending statements, they have to disclose everything. They disclose every fee. They disclose all of it. Well, back then, the only guys that really saw it was the mortgage brokers. And so I was looking at how much money the home builders were making. And I was looking how much the land developers were making, and I'm like, dude, forget this. Those guys are making a ton of money. And so I was dumb enough to start a custom home building company. So we started building these, at the time we called them McMansions, these little mini mansions all over Utah. And I gradually just got to the point where I'm like, you know what? I really like, honestly, the first step. I like the land development side. And so I kind of moved into that land development side and honestly was crushing it. We were killing it. I'd making stupid money. And then 2006, the economy just tanked. And overnight, I went from, I'd walk into the bank and they'd be like, hello, Mr. Gray. How are you, Mr. Gray? Here's your slippers, Mr. Gray. To all of a sudden it was like, Mr. Gray who? Like, they wouldn't loan me money. The industry just got so tight. And one of my friends had called me up. Unfortunately, I had some cash that I was sitting on. And he called me up and he said, hey, I read this article in the Wall Street Journal about solar in Austin, Texas. And so this is 2006. And at that time, Austin Energy had a $2.50 a watt rebate that they would give you 60 days after the system was installed. And then you had the 30% federal tax credit. And so I just started doing the math. I'm a math guy. I start doing the math and I'm like, God, these guys could have a system on their home that would cover all of their power and it would cost them $4,000. Like, that's the actual hard cost at the end of the day. And so we were dumb enough to try it. And so we got a bunch of my real estate buddies, a bunch of realtors, and we flew to Austin, got a little condo, and started knocking doors. And it's honestly been probably one of the best things ever since. Like, I'm absolutely passionate about solar, and I love the sales industry. And it's something like what you guys do is so motivating to me. Like, I love sales from the pure perspective that every sales guy I've ever met that's good is always improving. And you just don't see that in other industries. You don't. And so I love being around you guys and around the culture you create. And obviously the name of this podcast, like, it's a big deal to me. It's something I'm passionate about, not only because I'm a big archery hunter as well, but I love the thought of always focusing out. And that's really what you guys do, that culture you create. And so, that's how I kind of got started and got into this industry, and I've just never left. Like, I like being around it. I love being around the sales guys. I love the culture. I love the motivation. And I love seeing everybody lift each other up. All rising tide lifts all ships. And so I just love being around that space. So that's it. Simple.
That's it. Life's over.
Life's over.
And you do a phenomenal job of really embodying, kind of focusing on others.
Oh, thanks.
I think sometimes maybe to a fault.
Yeah,
sometimes I'm like, man, Tyrell should probably worry about Tyrell a little bit, huh?
Oh,
but it's awesome to be around. Like, I really, really do appreciate that about you. And do you feel like that's someone that you naturally are, or do you feel like that's something that you've tried to embody, or what is that about?
That's a great question, Jason. Honestly, I think that's just kind of who I always have been, just naturally as a young man. This is weird to me. So, weird story. The first time I really made really, really good money, I had a company. We were buying and selling foreclosed properties all over the United States, and we bought literally millions of them. Like, I'd go to Washington Mutual, who doesn't exist anymore, and I would buy, they called them tapes. I would buy a tape of 300 or 400 properties, and then I would turn around, bundle them up, throw off the crappy ones to nonprofits, and then I would sell the rest. I'd kind of clean them up, junk them out, and would sell them. And we were making so much money. And I always remember as a young kid, like, I wanted to be James Bond. I love the watches, I love the cars. And so my first big paycheck I got, I went to the BMW dealership in Salt Lake and I bought a 745 Li. And this is honestly the reason I bought it. You guys will laugh at me, but that car back then, it had a little square box by the radio, and if you pushed it, this little keypad popped out and you could, like, type in the phone number. But it was like so James Bond. I was like, oh, hell yeah. Like, I got the James Bond car. And I'll never forget, I bought the car, brought it home, showed my wife. I was all excited. We drove it up to Salt Lake and parked the underground parking at one of the places up there. Went in, had dinner, whatever we were doing. We came out and someone had keyed my car. Like, I don't even have the license plate yet. And someone had scratched a big, huge X on the hood, and then they'd start to write the F word, I'm sure, because it was an F on the side of the door. But then they hadn't finished it. They got caught, I'm sure. And I remember being so mad. I'm like, I would strangle this person. Like, if I could find this guy, I would hold him down, and I'd put his head underwater till the bubble stopped. Like, I was so upset. But it made me realize there's a lot of people. Envy is always from the bottom up. It's never from the top down. It's always guys are like, oh man, that guy's got something I don't, and I'm gonna make him hurt because I don't have that. And I have never felt that ever in my life. Like I love to see people succeed. Like it makes me happy. Honestly, River would come to your house last night and sit there in your backyard by your pool and with those crazy views and be like, holy cow, this is something that I got to help a little bit in. Like, it wasn't me, like you did the work, but just to know that I was a small part of being able to be part of that. Like, that's a big deal to me. Like, I absolutely love that. And I just don't understand when people do that. Like, I don't know why someone would scratch up my car, although I took it straight back and got that thing painted cherry red. It was the only red 745 Li in Utah.
Like, well, here's a good excuse to get the color changed.
There goes James Bond.
True
there he goes.
It was not black. But I don't know. I think that's something that's unique, and I see it disappearing, and I don't know why. Like, I love to see people succeed. I love seeing what you guys have accomplished. I love seeing, and as I've got older, this sounds kind of cheesy, but I've realized like the real importance of family, like how important your families are and taking care of your family. And like, Jason, this sounds cheesy, but me and you and your wife sitting outside the other day, like, those moments are awesome to me. Like,
yeah, that was cool.
Being able to see your relationship and hang out, like, that was cool. I love that.
Yeah. No, it was.
Yeah.
I after you left, I was like, oh, that was super freaking kind of Tyrell just to come hang out. Like, we were just like chilling. There was no agenda. There was nothing.
It was all on. It was not altruistic. It was all for me.
Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah. I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think, the interesting thing was when I was younger, probably 15, when I was in my early 20s, when I lacked confidence in myself, I actually really struggled with not like really being envious of people and things. And as I've gotten older and as I've gotten more confident, I feel like that's really gone by the wayside the most part, because it's just like, I'm the same as you. As I'm just like, hey, I really want to see people succeed. And I think, the thing that I've learned is if someone has something that I don't, then there's probably something I can learn from them. Absolutely. Or maybe it's something I want from that. Maybe it's a good thing, and maybe it's something that I can learn that I don't want. I've had plenty of examples both directions of, like, I look at people and I'm like, hey, I could really learn from this person in that area, and I can look at the same people or different people and be like, hey, I can really learn not to behave that way because, I don't like the way it makes me feel when they behave that way. So I'm going to try to be better. So
absolutely,
I think it's definitely, the more confidence you get, the better, or the easier it's, for me at least, it has been to not fill that like envious void.
Years ago I was at I don't even know if they're around. Does Infusionsoft still exist? I'm assuming they do.
I've never even heard of that.
They were a database back in the day. I was at a conference, and I wish I could remember this guy's name, but it was Infusionsoft's big launch. They had this big launch, and there was all these big money guys there. I remember going up to the main guy. God, his name is right on the tip of my tongue. Anyways, I remember going up to him and asking him, like, "Hey, how do I work with you? How can I be? I want to be you. I want to learn from you. Like, how can I be you?" And he goes, the first thing he said to me, which always stuck with me, he's like, "You need to learn to focus on other people and quit trying to focus on you."
Yeah.
He's like, "You're just trying to make money for you. You only want to be friends with me because you want to make more money."
Yeah.
He goes, "You need to learn to focus on other people first."
Yeah.
And it was humbling for me because I was like, oh man, that was kind of a little bit of a slap in the face.
Yeah.
But I realized at that point in my life, I really was. I was all about me. I wanted the next big truck, and I wanted the next boat, and I wanted to go on the next hunting trip. And I realized when I started really focusing on other people, that's when I started seeing actual success.
Yeah.
When I saw people around me starting to succeed is when and so that was a big opener. Even though I always wanted people to succeed, I was pretty focused on myself for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And when I started being like, okay, let's solve problems for other people, then all of a sudden it's like, hey, the sky's kind of the limit. Like,
I think it's just like a fear-based thing. It's like, it's not that, tell me if I'm wrong, but you still wanted other people to succeed, but your focus was always Tyrell, right?
Yep.
And I've definitely felt that same thing. It's like, but it's a fear of like, well, if I don't focus on myself, then I won't have enough. But it's like this, it's all bass backwards. It's like
100%.
actually when you start focusing on other people, the people are what's getting the money. Like
100%.
It's like it's selfish to be selfless.
Yeah.
It reminds me of
It's a great quote.
I don't know who said it, but it's like when kids go on missions for the Mormon Church. So there's some quote that says, "Forget yourself and just go to work."
Yeah.
You know, and I just think that's such a good thing for business. It's like just forget yourself and go to work. Like there's 200 sales reps that we all work with right now. It's like forget us and go. How do we make those 200 sales reps be as successful as possible? Which will make the company more profitable, which will make the company better, which will pay everybody more.
Absolutely.
But if I'm just focused on River, it's a short-term game. It's like, but if I'm focusing on, man, how do I get these 200 people to succeed, and then how do I get 200 more, and help them succeed? Then I'll have more than I've ever wanted. And so I
100%.
I think it's very important.
Yeah, I had a pretty unique experience. You may have to edit this in the production phase. I went through a really rough experience 5 years ago, and this is gonna sound super arrogant. I really felt like I was a mental giant. I felt like, man, nothing will ever break me. I'd done so much stuff in my life. I've done Ironman races off of the couch. I've done ultra marathons off the couch. I've done rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon. I've actually done that 3 times. And so in my mind, I had associated physical hardship with like mental strength, which it's actually not. It's not the same thing. But I'd also succeeded in business. I'd always been like, oh, if it doesn't work, I'm just going to pivot. Like I would always just try to figure it out. Well, unfortunately, I went through a divorce. And when I went through that divorce, it broke me. It truly broke me. And what I realized is physical pain or even financial pain, I could disassociate myself from it. Mm-hmm. But emotional pain, like when I was in actual hard emotional pain, it was always there. Like it wouldn't, like 24/7. And so I went from this place where I was actually doing really well, and I was kind of focusing and trying to grow a couple businesses, to all of a sudden I was in trouble. Like I was in really hard trouble. And I had gone to Texas on a hunting trip. And so I was self-medicating with experiences. So I would go on hunting trips and I would travel all over the world just so I didn't have to think about what I was going through. And I was walking through the airport, and there's a Buddhist monk in San Antonio Airport. And he's sitting there at the terminal getting ready to, waiting for a plane. And I'm going to get on my plane, and I just had this feeling. I'm like, I need to talk to this guy. Like I want to talk to him. And so I walked over to him, and I just introduced myself and said, hey, I've got a couple minutes before I've got to get on this plane. Can I talk to you for a second? And at the time, I was willing to talk to anybody. Like if there was a homeless guy in front of Maverick that I thought could help me, give me some advice, I'd talk to him. And this monk says, yeah. And so I sit down next to him, ended up missing my flight, stayed with him for 6 hours, ended up going and getting a hotel that night and then flying on a different flight the next day. But I wrote it down, a lot of it in my journal. But one of the things, like I was talking to him and I was just telling him, this pain and this anguish and this hurt I felt inside. And he told me, he's like, Tyrell, when's the last time you focused on someone else? And I just realized, I'm like, I was in the midst of the worst in my life, and all I could think about was me. And here he is kind of chastising me and being like, look, you think your life's so bad. Mm-hmm. Like everybody's got struggles. Everybody goes through hard things. Like you don't know the guy you run into. You don't know if his marriage is good. You don't know if his business is good. He may have just got robbed. You don't know. But you're so focused on you that you're not trying to help anyone out. And so that stuck with me. There was a lot of stuff that he said that was really amazing, but that next flight home, I just committed. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try to pick one person a week and just go do something for them. And so my neighbors at the time, they've both moved now. Well, the one's passed away, but they were an older couple. And so my very first thing was, it was stupid, but I literally went and knocked on their door and just said, hey, can I weed your garden? And so I spent an hour that first day I got home weeding their garden. And what I realized when I left is by giving service to someone else, and it was that simple. It was kind of cheesy, but she came out, talked to me, and brought me a lemonade, and we hung out. And for the first time in 2.5 years, for a brief moment, I didn't feel that pain. And so I realized, okay, this is not only a key for me to help dig myself out of this emotional hellhole that I was in, but I'm like, this is literally a key to life. Like, who can I help? Who's the next person that I can help? Like, is there someone else, in my religion that I go to? Is there someone in our work environment? but everybody has got some struggle. Now, some struggles maybe a little bit less, but everybody's got something. And so just as much as being kind and nice and smiling, but literally just reaching out and saying, hey, how can I help somebody? Like you said, it's, how did you say that just a second ago? It really becomes me that's getting helped.
Yeah.
What did you say? You said
being selfless or being selfless is selfish.
Selfish, yep,
Yeah.
100%. And that's what it was. Like, and I realized I feel better about myself when I've had the opportunity to help other people.
Yeah, that's huge.
Dead silence.
No, I absolutely love that. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons I really struggle with people that trying to tread lightly here, but I'll just go all in. I struggle with people that want to talk about mental health all the time, because I think when I'm in that state, like, I can be depressed just like anybody else.
For sure.
I have anxiety every freaking day. Like, I feel like with the same mental issues that a lot of people do. I think most people do. I think it's just how people handle it is so different. And like, we had one of my kids was going through some mental struggles, and I really struggle to be, I don't know if sympathetic is the right word, because I'm like, we are the issue. Like, we are the issue, and we get so focused on ourselves, and all the arrows come in to kind of tie it back to the podcast name here. It's like all the arrows come in, and we're so focused on poor me, poor me, poor me, poor me. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy at the end of the day. And it's like the second I actually had this thought yesterday. It's funny that you said that, as I was like, you know what? I really need to start focusing on at least trying to do one thing a day for other people, because it's easy to get stuck in self mode, when you're running businesses and you have employees and you have a wife and kids, and it's like, a lot of days I feel like I'm just trying to,
100%.
just check all the boxes. And it's like, but anyway, going back to the mental health thing, it's just like, it's so, it'll literally just set you free to just, I had this thought yesterday we had left a restaurant, and this girl that had helped us served our food at Costa Vida. She was standing by the exit, and she is not probably the type of person that most people would say, hey, Jason and that girl probably aren't going to be best friends. She's got, bull-nose piercing, tattooed from head to toe, which there's nothing wrong with any of that. It's just, that's not generally the type of people I'm going to hang around.
Sure.
And I just looked at her and I was like, hey, how are you doing? And she lit up, and she's like, I'm good. Thank you for asking. And I said, hey, thank you so much for serving us our food.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And she just like, and it was just like, and I just walked away, and I'm like, you know what? It is so easy to be kind and just to go the little bit extra effort to make someone feel good that I could have just walked right by. And it made me feel good, because I could tell it meant something to her that one of the customers actually recognized her. But it's just like, it's that prescription for, if you want to solve your mental health, you really just have to get out of your own way and just smile at people and just begin to try to put effort into other people, and it will absolutely make you feel better. And I love that that's kind of what you, and I know how hard of a time that was for you, because we talk about it frequently. I know how much of an impact it's had on your life.
Yeah, that was a big one.
What's like your paradigm on family now? Like, what's like, because you're a great father.
Oh,
you're
man,
always with your kids.
I'm trying to catch up to you guys.
We gotta hang out with them. Last night you spent a lot of time with them. You're always investing time with them. You're always with your fiance. Like congrats. Like you just that's a priority for you. Like, what's your paradigm on family and spending time with them now?
Okay,
yeah.
so
where's Crystal in? She's got to be in here.
First time I've ever seen her not with you, actually.
So let me give you some background. This actually is something that meant a lot to me, and hopefully this will reach out to some of you guys that are listening on the podcast. Kind of coming back to my divorce. When I went through my divorce, I was talking to my ex-wife once about something I can't remember, and she had just made the comment that the guy that she was with at the time was a better man than me and a better man than I'd ever be. And it hurt.
Ooh.
Like that was painful. Like that hurt. And I was like, man, I don't feel like I'm that bad a guy. And so I kind of, at the time, I was really in a spiritual mode, and I'm like, okay, well, what does God say a man should be? And So I kind of went down this rabbit hole, reading all the scriptures in the Bible, and like, what does God define a man as? And I kind of got to this point where I realized a lot of the cultures that I look up to have a specific code that they live by. For example, the Spartans, like they had a very specific code that they lived by. The Navy SEALs, I've got a bunch of friends that are in the teams, and I've had a chance to have some just amazing mentors that were Navy SEALs, and they're like, the ethos, that Navy SEAL ethos is burned on their heart. Like, they have this code. And what I realized is, unfortunately for me growing up, I'd had a lot of great people around me, and I had a lot of great mentors, but I never really had my own code. I never had a code that I chose to live by. And so I sat down and I said, you know what? I want to figure out, like, who is Tyrell Gray, and how is he going to live his life? Like, what is your code? Like, and I don't think most people know what their code is. And if you're on this podcast and you don't have one, my challenge is for you to figure that out. And so I sat down, and for me, River, to kind of bring that back, I realized the important things for me was I wanted to keep God first in my life. I felt like I lost that path. I didn't have spirituality at all, and it kind of helped in the demise, unfortunately, of my marriage. I wanted to keep my family first, and I wanted to make sure I had my integrity. And so I actually tattooed it on my chest backwards. You've probably seen it. So you can't read it. Like, if you're looking at it, you can't read it. But every morning when I shave, I look at it in the mirror and I can see it perfect. And it just says God first, family forever, and integrity always. And that's how I measure my life. And if there's a decision I have to make, if it violates one of those, if it doesn't keep my family first, if it diminishes my integrity, then I don't do it. I'm out. Like, I don't believe in that. And so, yes, what you said to family to me is my second most important thing. I hate to rank them as that. But it truly, like, I want God first in my life and my family second. And I think, we have this short window with our kids to inspire them and motivate them. And like you said, Jason, like, one of the things I tell my kids about mental health is you get the choice to be the victim or the hero in your own story every day. Like, you're writing your book, so you decide. Do you want to be the victim? Or are you going to be the one that's like, oh, my life sucks, everybody picked on me, life happened to me? Or are you going to be the hero and be like, no, I happen to life. Like, I make the decisions. I'm making sure that I'm writing my script, and I'm going to be the hero. Like, the end of this book, when the chapter closes, people are going to be like, I want to be that guy. Like, that's who I want to be.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, family's huge for me. Like, that was a long answer. But yeah, I like family.
So what I think I'm really intrigued by is, I'm impressed by you. I'm impressed by you because I have one son. And I feel like I'm just like, how do you run a bit? How do you work really hard, be super motivated, try to stay in shape, be a good husband, have hobbies, and do all these things and like make him successful? And you spend a lot of time hunting, so I know hobbies are important.
Too much.
You're in good shape, which I don't know how, because you down Snickers like no one I've ever met. So you're in good shape. You have kids that love you. You're engaged.
I appreciate that.
And you have a relationship with God. Like, what's your thoughts on like time management and investing into the right things and yeah, time management is my question. Like, how do you manage all of it? And one thing to say is you're also successful in business.
Oh, I appreciate that.
So to win in all areas is very impressive. So how do you think about it?
I think it's actually something that I'm not the best at, and it's something I'm working on. That same Buddhist monk that I talked to, he talked a lot about balance in life and the universe. So from the Buddhist methodology, the Buddhist beliefs, everything is in balance. And so they try to keep everything in harmony. They believe that everything, the insects, all animals have a space in this world, and they keep everything in balance. They keep the world in balance. And so that's one of the things I've focused hard on is trying to make sure that I am focusing on the task at hand. So when I'm at the office, I'm focused on 100% at the office. But the second I come home and I'm with my kids, I am focused on my kids. Like, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on social media, but I put my phone away. My kids probably will hate me for this, but I make them play card games with me. We play Cover Your Assets. We play all kinds of stuff. But it's because I realize the best present is to be present. Like, I want my kids to know that matters. And then with my fiance, who's amazing, I just try to make sure that every day I'm earning her respect, I'm earning her admiration, and I'm earning her love. And so I try to do something every day for her. And so I'm not the best at it, but I think that truly is the key for me, is keeping that balance, but focusing on what task is at hand.
I love that. One thing I struggle with, because I agree, But my fear is what I'm like told myself for years is if I'm not engaged in work and I'm not on my phone and I'm not like rooting on the guys, I'm not posting on it, and like my whole bit, the whole thing's gonna fall apart. Like right now, I'm like, okay, God, like I need to, you know, like
I
what?
need to be posting something.
So like, what would you say to like? Obviously, I can't just throw it and just be like never check it. But I probably am a little bit more addicted to it than is healthy. Probably more out of fear because I'm like I don't want people to think I'm just not working and not getting after it. Anyway, so what would you say to that? Because like and with that, like that's something I struggle with like every day. I'm like, okay, I want to be present, but I also want to be, you know, engaged. Anyway, what are your thoughts on what I'm saying? I want to hear your thoughts too.
I'll tell you what comes to mind for me, and you guys know this. One of my good friends, Dan Tyrell, who's a Navy SEAL, passed away, and I read you guys that one email from him. But the thing that comes to mind, especially when it comes to work, so Dan Tyrell was Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 7, highly decorated Navy SEAL, absolutely phenomenal individual that I got to have as a mentor in my life for 4 years. 4 years of my life. Unfortunately passed away a year ago now. But we found after he passed away an email that he had sent. There was another Navy SEAL that he served with that was becoming a Master Chief, and he had emailed Dan, and he said, hey, Dan, like I'm about to become Master Chief. Tell me what to do. Like, how do I be a successful Master Chief? And there's 7 points to that email, but one of the things he said, and I think this is a good point for you, River, is he said, make sure you're always training your replacement. Like, make sure you're training the guy that's going to be able to step up and fill your shoes. So what you do is amazing. And obviously I get first row seat to watch you do it. But my advice would be we've got to start training the guy that's doing that same thing. So that when you're with your family, you can focus on just being with your family. And you know that there's a guy behind you that's got your 6. He's got your back, and he's posting and he's checking. And I see that happening already. Like it's coming. And it's like anything. With a startup, when you first start up any company, there's so much time that is so spent on the company that everything else kind of gets neglected. But eventually, as the company matures and grows, it will get into balance. And so I don't want you to ever beat yourself up, and especially anybody listening out there. You may be in that time in the season where right now you're having to put in way more effort than you normally would. But as the season, as it grows, you've got to be able to make sure you've trained your replacement so that you can start stepping back and let the company feed itself. And so that's my gut. Whether that's good advice or bad advice. What do you think, Jason?
Buckle up, Zach.
Oh, Zach, Jake, and Austin.
Buckle up.
Buckle in, buddies. No, I completely agree. I think, I feel a heavy amount of guilt because I feel like I've done that, and it happens to be my partner who's taken it over. So I feel like I've actually been able to take a step back from a lot of that. But I also think, I actually look at it and I'm like, I think our company actually is way more advanced than you probably, you can't see, what's the old saying? You can't see the forest from the trees. Yeah. Like, I think maybe you're trying to see something that's already there. But I think, I was thinking about this yesterday, and I'm going to call myself out, and I'm going to call you out a little bit too, cause it has to do with you. So, and I was like, man, like the last couple weeks, I've just been like, man, I've put on I've put 15 pounds back on. I'm feeling like my shirts look like Ty's, but I'm fat and he's skinny. Ty looks good in his shirts. I do not.
Ty's never wearing that Dev shirt again.
No, I'm not. Ty looks great in his shirt. I'm 40 pounds overweight and my shirt's baby gapping. So, but I just feel it lately. Right. And I'm like, and in my head, I'm like, man, why do I freaking struggle so much with my weight? And honestly, it's through a lot of interactions with you guys, but Tyrell yesterday was like, well, you're the skinniest fat guy I know. And just like, and it just like made me think, I'm like, man, I have these stories in my head about how hard weight loss is and how hard it is to maintain because quite frankly, over the years, I've allowed myself to be up to 300 pounds. I'm down to like 230 right now. I was down to 215, not too long ago. And I just kind of bounce around, but it's because of the story that's in my head. And I think for you, the first thing you got to do is just change your story, and I was actually evaluating it last night, and you were talking about how hard it is to have kids. You're like, man, I can't believe how you guys do it with 3 kids. And I actually was just like, Rivers needs to stop saying that.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I was thinking. I was like, it's not hard to have kids. It's actually awesome. Like, Beckham's freaking so much fun right now.
Yeah.
And I know you know that because you're a freaking phenomenal dad, but I'm like, it's not that hard to have kids.
Yeah.
And like, I think you have latched onto this story of how hard it is to have a family. And it is hard, don't get me wrong, like, but it's really not that hard. Like kids kind of just do their thing, and you kind of, as human instinct, you kind of just chase them around and do your thing. And before you know it, and I sound like a real old fart now, but before you know it, your kids are old and you wish they, I play with Beckham now, and I'm like, man, I really wish I would have. Yeah.
Instead of viewing it as like a challenge, viewing it as like, hey, this is a blessing.
Yeah,
and there's challenges that come up. But
it's hard when you're in it, especially as a family. But I think, and it goes with, the engagement stuff too. But I think like change your story about the, I think the problem is, from my perspective, and I know this is true because I've felt this way before, but it's like, you don't really want to be unengaged because there's a certain level of self-importance you feel from being that person within the company right now.
Don't want to be forgotten.
Yeah, you don't want to be forgotten.
Yeah. Remember me. I see that.
And it's like, so it's like you've got to, first of all, you got to make sure you really want that change and you're ready for that, because you are going to have to pass the torch to, like, somebody else is going to have to become the guy in the company
in order to grow. Yeah.
And it's hard for me a lot of times. Like I feel like half our employees don't even know my name. I'm like, everyone knows River. And some days I'm like, hey, mother freakers, like I work here too. But then I just remember, I'm like, hey, that's actually a huge gift. Like, they all call River when there's problems, and I'm just at home hanging out with my wife. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but it's just like, that was a very hard transition for me. And I think you've got to be ready for that transition as well in the business of, like, hey, I'm no longer going to be necessarily that guy potentially.
Yeah. And it's like what you're talking about is like arrows in, right? It's like, oh, my self-importance, like, doesn't matter. Like, what matters is the company. What matters is our team. What matters is everybody thriving. And it's like, I got to let go.
I can tell you right now, if in 3 years from now, if whichever one of our employees or whichever one of our partners, I hate calling people employees because I think we all work together, but
for sure.
Whichever person that we work with gravitates to that role, it's a hell of a lot more fun to watch them watch that transition happen with them, like I've watched you, than it is to have it within yourself. And it's, some days it's still difficult because as a human, you have an ego and you want that self-importance. But when you see what you've done, what's not what you've done, what they've done, it's, I don't know. I just think that's a whole loaded question that you asked, and I'm giving you a very long answer.
Well, I just got two like perspectives I can chew on and think about.
Chew on it. Yeah. So, but I think just change the story, make sure you're ready for what you're asking for, and then start to, I think it goes right into what he's saying, is start to have someone be ready to take it over. So,
yeah, I think. And we'll transition out because I'm like making it about me. Arrows in, Tyrell's here. I was just,
I know we're kind of running close on time. We got a minute?
Oh, we got all the minutes.
We got all the minutes. All right. I don't know. I just had the story pop in my head a couple times. It's kind of funny in the end. It's humorous, but it made a big impact in my life. So years and years ago, I used to work full time as a big game guide. So I started my mortgage company. Actually sold the mortgage company, made a good chunk of change. And I'm like, I want to go to Alaska. I've got money in my pocket. And so I went to Alaska and literally just started guiding hunts. And so I did that for probably 3 years full time, and an amazing career. Like, I loved it, the things I've seen and the experience I've had, and I've kept those licenses current. So I still go every year for 2 weeks, but I don't do it, for 180 days a year anymore. But I had a client one year come up, and this was before we had satellite phones, before we had in-reach communicators. Like, the pilots would take us out and drop us off in an area, and then they wouldn't come back for 10 days. Like, we were just there. And so you had to survive for 10 days. And if anybody gets curious enough, where this event happened was on the Kizaralik River in the Kilbuck Mountain Range. And so it's this huge valley. I'd actually been out there already for 10 days. One client leaves, and they bring in this new client. Guy from Minnesota, his name's Richard, and he lands. Man, I'm helping him get his gear and helping him get in a tent. So I have a tent. He has his own tent. And I'm helping him get all his crap in his tent. And he's just super somber, like almost to the point of, like, depressing somber. And so I'm kind of talking to him like, hey, you all right? What's going on? And he just starts opening up, and he just starts kind of unloading on me. So this hunt is happening in September. The previous December, he had been in Dallas at the Safari Club International show, and he had booked this hunt, and he had paid full price for it. He was had a land developer and a land development company, and he had a landscaping company, and he had a ton of money. And so he had paid for this hunt in December. The following February, his daughter had asked if she could go out with her boyfriend on Valentine's Day. He had got a new sports car, and he wanted to take her out. He had told her yes. His wife had told her no. And then the daughter comes to him. He's like, just do it. And so she sneaks out, goes for a ride with her boyfriend, ends up wrecking the car, and gets killed. Both of them get killed. Well, it was their only daughter. She was 16 years old. It was her only daughter. So that happens in February. Him and his wife start having a lot of stress. His wife's feeling like, I told her not to go. You told her she could go. This is why she's passed away. And so they end up going through a divorce in May. And then in August, he goes into the office, and all the money's gone. All the employees are gone. Doors are shut. And his business partner had embezzled $18 million and fled the country. And so now he's got this hunt booked for the following month that's already paid for, and he also has no money, so he might as well go. And so he comes to me in Alaska, and he tells me this story, and I can remember looking at him and just being like, oh my gosh, this is the worst story I've ever heard.
This is going to be a long 10
this is
days.
gonna be a long day. And so I'm trying to be optimistic. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. There's no radios, there's no TV, like, you're going to love it. Like, this is as wild as Alaska gets wild. Like, you will not see another human being unless it's a jetliner. There's nothing else out there. And so I'm like, okay, we put all his stuff in his tent, and I'm trying to be all, let's go, we can do this. And we hike up on the hill, and we sit down, and I'm like, hey, let's just glass for a couple hours. We're looking specifically for grizzly bears. I'm like, let's see if we can find a bear, because what they would do in the fall seasons, they're coming off of the rivers. They're not eating the salmon anymore. They're coming up and eating the blueberries. And so if you can find a bear on a blueberry patch, a lot of times they'll stay for a day or two. Like, they'll just sit there and eat. And so I'm like, hey, let's see if we can find a bear, and we'll make a plan. We'll get over there in the morning. And so we get up on the hill, and we sit down, and as soon as I put my binoculars up, like, he's sitting on my left-hand side, and it's dead silent, right? There's nothing but the wind, and all of a sudden I hear, and he just starts bawling. So I look over, and I'm like, oh, my gosh. like, he has lost it. And so I'm just like, oh, there, buddy. Like, it's going to be okay. And he's like, I shouldn't be here. I don't have any reason to live. I should just kill myself. And I'm like, no. Like, tomorrow's a new day. And I'm like, I'm not qualified for this. I don't know what to say to this guy. I'm 24 years old, 25 years old, I guess, at this point. I'm like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to tell him. I have no life advice. I am the least qualified person to handle this situation. And so I'm like, hey, let's go back. We go back to tent. We cook dinner. And he's just, like, he won't stop. He's just crying. And he's just like, I can't live like this. Like, there's no point to life. My daughter's dead. And he's like, my wife's gone. And I was like, no, dude, tomorrow's going to be awesome. I'm like, dude, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. So he goes to bed. I clean up everything, go to bed.
Hide the guns.
Middle of the night, I hear a gunshot.
Oh.
And so I wake up, like, I sit bolt upright in bed, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this dude just killed himself in the middle of Alaska, and no one's going to be here for 9 days. This is a 10-day hunt. We've only got 1 day down. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I am sick to my stomach. Like, I'm shaking. And so I yell, Richard. I'm like, Richard. Nothing. And I'm like, oh my heck. I'm like, I don't even know what to do. Like, what do I do? So I get up and I get dressed and I get my flashlight and I go outside and I go over to his tent and I'm like, Richard, nothing. Like, he's not answering. And he's shooting a 300 Win Mag. And so I walk around the tent and there's no holes in the tent and there's no blood on the tent. And so I'm like, what in the heck? Like, where did he shoot himself that it didn't blow the tent up too? And so I'm just like, I shake the tent. I'm like, Richard, and nothing. And so I get down by the tent door and I'm like, okay, you can do this, buddy. You can do this. Like, you got to unzip this. And so it's probably been an hour now that I've been calling his name. So I get down and I rip that zipper open. He's laying in his bed sleeping. He's got earplugs in. I dreamt the whole damn thing.
Oh,
I shine this light on him. He sits up and he goes, what the hell? He goes, you gay or something? And I go, no. And I just re-zip the tent. And I go back to my tent and I'm just like, oh my gosh, we can never talk about this ever again. And so in my mind, I was like, I don't want to tell him, you were so depressed I thought you killed yourself. Like, I didn't want to talk about it. But then at the other time, I'm like, well, I kind of need to, right? I want him to know I was concerned. And so the next morning he comes in and he's like, dude, what in the hell was that? And I just told him, I said, man, like, I honestly thought you'd shot yourself. After last night, what you talked and what you said, I honestly thought you'd shot yourself. And he got emotional, and he goes, dude, you don't understand how much that means to me that another human being cares about me.
Yeah.
He's like, he goes, last night I went to bed thinking that nobody in this world cares about me. He goes, but here you are at 3 a.m. walking around with a flashlight, just trying to make sure I'm okay. And so I realized, at that point, and I've thought about that experience a lot, and I've talked to him several times, and he's doing, by the way, amazing now. Remarried, actually he had a baby at 56 years old. So him and his wife's 30. She's 34, I think. She's almost 20 years younger than him. And they got this cute little family, and life's amazing, right? But at that moment, at his very bottom, when life was the worst, like what he really wanted was just to know that someone else cared about him. That was it. And hopefully, if anybody listen to this, hopefully nobody's in that spot. But if you're in that spot, you've got to know that people care about you. There's people out there that care about you and love you and that you're needed. You're valued and you're needed. And you need to be here. Yeah. So I don't know why I kept thinking about that story, but as you were talking, I was just like, man, I think that's a big part of Arrows Out, is just helping people realize, hey, like I care about you. And it can be that simple, like you said with that girl that you talked to, just letting them know, hey, how's your day going? A smile, whatever. But especially your family, letting your family know, hey, I love you, I care about you, I want to see you succeed. I think that matters.
I think like vulnerability kind of opens it up. I'm sure it was uncomfortable for you.
Oh yeah,
but if he was never vulnerable, you would have never,
no.
If he would have just suffered in silence, that might not have been a fake gunshot.
It could have been.
Like, and, or maybe in a couple of days where he's like, you know what, Tyrell doesn't even care because this is just some go happy, go lucky, and I freaking hate my life. But I'm not gonna I don't feel comfortable enough to share. And I think that's something that's super important, is to be willing to be like, hey, this is where I'm at, and that opens up that space.
Yeah, and it's hard, especially as men. Like nowadays, I don't know why that's frowned upon, but I think that's important to be able to share those emotions, and hopefully you can share that with your spouse or your significant other. But if you can't, I'm a huge proponent of therapy, and I know it's got a negative connotation, and I don't know why, but I honestly believe that every person should be talking to a therapist. We go to the gym and we work out our muscles, and we focus on our finances, and we try to work on our relationship. But what are you doing to work on your mental health? What are you doing to actively get stronger mentally, work through emotions, be stronger emotionally? That stuff I think is so underrated.
Yeah. And
I think it's part of what you came back to earlier, is having balance in life. Is making sure that you're focusing on every part of your, physical, mental, spiritual, all of that needs to be focused on.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Thankfully, Richard's good.
Richard.
End of the story.
Better than good. 36 years old.
36 years, 20 years older, 20 years younger than him, and cute little kid. Kid's
That's
beautiful.
awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought that story was going to end differently. I was like, dang, well.
I'm not going to lie. I was super nervous.
This is going to get depressing in a hurry. Thanks, Tyrell.
I was going to tie this all in.
I was super nervous. I'm not kidding. That was a long night for me for that
hour.
One
thing I've wondered, I guess you kind of answered it, but to me, one thing that I maybe want to embody over the coming years, it feels to me like you kind of you beat to your own drum. You do what you want when you want. And not always. I mean, in a way that, but I just you're here, you're here. You showed up. We weren't sure if you were going to show up today. Just kidding. But no, I just mean hunting. You do a lot of hunting.
Yeah.
Would you say, you do a lot with your family? Like River said, you also show up for, I know you have several, a handful of different businesses that you're involved with, including primarily the one that, we work together on, or the couple that we work together on. But I guess my question is do you feel like at a younger age that at some point you said, hey, this is the life I want and I'm going to create that? Or has it just I don't know. For me, I feel like I spend so much time working and I want to be able to give more to my hobbies and to my kids and to my kids' hobbies. And I guess I'm just what did you do to create that for yourself?
Dude, that's actually a great question, Jason. I appreciate your perspective from the outside looking in. And the honest truth is, I was the opposite of you when I was younger. And so it's taken me a while to get to an actual balance point. When I was younger, I had a mentor early on in life that said something, and I know he thought it was inspirational, but it kind of derailed my path a little bit. He said there's 3 things you can spend money on. You can spend money on investments, you can spend money on education, you can spend money on an experience. Well, I love the outdoors, and I'm super passionate. So how that resonated to my young brain was go do fun stuff. And so I would almost, I never put myself in debt over it, but I would almost spend every penny I made on the next experience, the next expedition, climb the next tallest mountain, go on the next hunting trip. And as I got older, I realized that there has to be a balance in that too. And so I've had to do the exact opposite of you. It's just been in the last 15 years, I've started to realize, okay, wait a minute. Like, I want to make sure that I'm financially secure for my family. Like, I want my kids to be financially secure, and I want to be able to take them on those experiences too. And so I kind of went the opposite. And I think that's something, coming back to kind of the balance thing, the yin and the yang, the balance of the universe is trying to make sure that you are taking some time for yourself. Like, that matters. It really does. Like River, I love, and I apologize I wasn't there with you this morning. I love that you're getting into jiu-jitsu. Like, that's a huge deal to me. That's not just a hobby. To me, that's a lifestyle. Like, It becomes something that truly almost becomes part of your identity. But it's something where you can be proud of it. You can grow in it. You get more successful at it. You know you're going to be able to defend your family in an emergency situation. Like, no, I got this. Like, I'm going to put a plata on this guy and he's going to cry for an hour. Like, right? Like, and so I love that those hobbies of yours are starting to come in balance. And Jason, I love that you said that, because it's one of those things that will change your life when you start realizing that life's short, and make sure that you get to enjoy a little bit of it, right?
Yeah.
Like taking the kids to Lake Powell, taking them, like going out with you guys on your boat. That was amazing. Like, I love those small memories, and they've got to be in balance, obviously, but God, don't miss a chance to actually live life. I mean, someone said that quote, everybody lives, but not everybody gets a chance to really live. And I'm like, oh man, let's enjoy it while we're here.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Let me ask you one other question that I just think is really interesting that I want to hear your perspective on is, you said you want your kids to, what did you say about being financially?
Just be safe, be secure.
What exactly does that mean to you? Like, does that mean when they get older or now, or?
Great question. So for me as a young man growing up, I honestly didn't realize I never needed anything. Like, everything I ever needed, my mom and dad got for me. But my dad was a coal miner, worked a graveyard shift in a coal mine for 28 years. So he would leave the house at 10 o'clock at night, and he'd work till 6 o'clock the next morning and then come home. He did that for 28 years to provide for us kids. And their best year together, my mom was a dental hygienist and my dad is a coal miner. Their best year ever, they made 70 grand, which honestly in today's market, I don't know how you could live on 70 grand. And they raised 4 kids, and that was their best year ever. But because of that, I didn't get to experience some of the stuff that I want my kids to experience. Like, I want my kids to be able to go to college and focus on college. And I'm not saying that it's a delicate balance, right? Because I don't want my kids to be spoiled, and I'm not just giving them money. Like, I want them to learn the value of money and how money can help everybody. It helps their lives be better. It helps my lives be better.
So that's what scares me the most, right? And I think that's where you're heading into, is like starting to make good money and starting to have a pretty healthy life. One of the things that scares me the most is how do you plan to, and I think this is where you're headed, and I apologize for cutting you off,
good.
But like, what is your thoughts on how you plan to kind of bridge that gap with your kids of like, hey, I'm going to provide for you, but at some point you got to kind of kick them out the nest and say, you got to go provide for yourself. It's this weird balance. And as my kids are getting older, I've always said I'm going to handle it one way, but as my kids are getting older, I can already tell it's becoming more and more difficult to like actually envision myself being just like the kind of hard ass that I've acted like I'm going to be.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to a good friend of mine, Bo Gardner, and we were actually sitting down with Casey Baugh, and we were BS, and we were sitting in Vivint's headquarters back at the time, and we were just talking, and I can't remember if it was Bo or Casey. I think it was Bo that said it. Bo just said, look, I don't necessarily want my kids to have more than I have. I just want them to be better than I am. And that changed my mindset to where I realized if I'm raising an actual good kid that knows the value of hard work, that is honest, knows the value of integrity, that cares about other people, they're going to be a good person regardless. If I spoil them and buy them a trip to Paris for their 16th. Like they're still going to be successful, hardworking members of society. And so that's really become my focus is, look, I want my kids to be able to have, like I love to ski. I love downhill skiing. And I never got that chance when I was a kid, ever. But, dude, I buy my kids season passes every year. But I don't think that's spoiling them. I think that's giving them the chance to have an opportunity at something that I just never had. I never had that chance. And so my focus has really become, I really work hard on teaching them those things, teaching them integrity and honesty and character, and making sure, like, my kids have to work. Like, they don't get an allowance or anything, but they all have chores they have to do. We got horses. They got to feed the horses. We got to take care of the dogs. Someone has to do the dishes.
They pulled the weeds yesterday.
They pulled weeds yesterday all afternoon.
I know that.
So they all still work. And to me, I'm more worried about helping make sure that they are good people than I am concerned about if I gave them too much, bought them something too nice.
Yeah, I don't worry about it as much now. I'm like, man, that transition when like they become an adult of like, how do you
kind of wean the purse strings?
wean them off and have them create themselves. But I mean, I don't know. I know I watched what my parents did, and I feel like, my dad at some point just said, enough's enough. You got to go figure it out. And I always thought like, oh, that's just what we'll do. But I think it's when you're the parent that does have an excess, of financial means, it's a lot easier said than done. So.
Well, and it's easy for me to say right now because I'm not to that point. I'm getting close. My oldest is 17. She's just getting ready to move out. And kind of the framework that I've set with my kids, and they all know this, is I've told them, I'm like, look, I want you to succeed. So if there's a specific career you want, I'm more than willing to pay for your college, if that's what it is, or a tech school, or whatever you want to do. I will pay for that. But you have to maintain a certain GPA. Like my daughter is wanting to be a marine biologist, and so she knows she has to maintain a 3.5 GPA, or the dad scholarship ends. Like that's where it ends. So she has to maintain that. But then once they have a job, they know that they're on their own. Now, however, having said that, they also know that I am more than willing to invest in any business that they have. If they bring me a business plan, and my youngest son's actually, or my middle boy actually is really good at this. He's good at coming to me and being like, Dad, this is what I want to do. This is what the costs are going to be. This is how much money I think I can make. Will you invest with me? So, for example, in elementary school, he comes to me and he's like, Dad, there's no vending machines in elementary school, and all the kids all want snacks. And he's like, so I think if I had snacks in my backpack, I think I could sell them. So I said, well, let's figure it out. So we went to Costco and we figured out how much it cost for, the bulk M&Ms. And so he figured it out down to, okay, so this bag of M&Ms cost me 27 cents. So if I buy it for $1, if I sell it for $1, then I'm going to make this much money. And then I can, and then I told him, I was like, look, I'm going to loan it to you, but you've got to pay me back. And so in elementary school, he was literally like a mini vending machine. He walked around with his backpack, just selling candy all the time.
That's awesome.
But to me, I'm like, look, and hopefully we'll see when it gets to that point. Hopefully they understand. Look, I want to help you and prepare you and help you launch. I'll cover the cost to get you launched. I'm going to get you educated. I'll make sure you've got a safe vehicle. I'm going to get you out the door. But once you're out the door, the honest truth is, man, the flavor is in the juice. It's in doing it. Like the excitement in life is in succeeding on your own, not having Dad pay for it. Like there's nothing in that.
Yeah, I think that's what scares me the most is if your kids don't ever go on to experience building their own kind of self-worth, they can live in your shadow and maybe live comfortably, but man, they're missing out on so much.
Oh, so yeah. This is the experience. This is terrible to say, but like my daughter, I hope she doesn't listen to this podcast. There's this small part of me that I'm like, I kind of want her to have her heart broke, because, and the reason behind that, let me defend myself, is I want her to realize the value in a relationship. I want her to have a boyfriend and then have it fall through, so that when she finds her husband, she's like, no, this is worth working for. Like, I'm going to fight for this. Like, and I don't know why as a culture right now, it seems like we have this culture of everybody quits. You don't like your job, quit. You don't like your hair color, change it. You don't like whatever. Like everybody's just like quit. They don't fight through. And so I kind of want her to have her heart broke. And I'm not afraid of my kids having bad experiences, because I'm hoping I can be there to coach them through that bad experience so that they can savor the good experiences.
Not to coddle, but to coach.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool.
I share one. Sorry.
Yeah, no,
you
go
guys
ahead.
Get me talking. I can't shut up. This was a cool experience for me. I mentored a kid that became a Navy SEAL. Amazing young man. He's on Team 5 right now. when he graduated from his buds class, so I got to go down. We were on the grinder. Like if you guys don't know what that is, it's the actual. They've got basically just an asphalt pad, and it's got little.
Oh, not the app.
No, not the app. Totally opposite. I'm not even going to go there. But it's just an asphalt thing that's got some fins, painted on it, and that's where they do all their hard work during Navy SEAL training, like when they're going through buds. So they beat the crap out of them. They do push-ups and sit-ups and pull-ups. And there's pull-up bars all the way around it. Well, when they graduate, the graduation's held right on that same spot. And so we went in, watched the graduation. His mom and dad had rented an Airbnb there in town in Coronado. And that night, after they'd graduated, 7 of those kids, and they're literally kids, showed up at the place, at that little condo or that house that we'd rented. And so I got a chance to meet and talk to each one of them. And these guys, the oldest one was my friend, who was 24, but one of the kids is 18 years old. So he was 18 when he went in. I think he was 19 when he graduated. And they're just these young kids. And you think in your mind, you're like, that experience, that physical experience is probably one of the hardest physical experiences, but it's also designed mentally to break them. Like they do all of these mental things we can talk about on another podcast to try to break people. Because what they're looking for is they're looking for the mentally strongest guys. They have a saying that Navy SEAL, like Hell Week Buds, doesn't create Navy SEALs. It finds the guys that already were. So these kids come over to the house, and like I said, there were 7 of them, and they start sharing their stories, and they are the absolute worst stories I've ever heard, ever. Just like physical abuse, mental abuse, violence between parents, homelessness. One of the kids, his mom had been married and divorced 4 different times. He got beat up every time. Finally, he's 14 years old. He runs away. So he lived on the street from the time he was 14 till he was 18 years old, and he's like, I got to make something of my life. And he walked into a recruiting office and got into the BUDS program, got into the Navy SEAL program. And so they share these stories, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, these guys are like just the worst experiences ever. And one of the kids, he's sitting there and we were talking about it, and I asked him, I'm like, well, how hard was Hell Week? And he goes, I got to go to a bed every night, and I got fed 4 times a day. He goes, it was awesome. And I just thought, you know what? I think as parents, sometimes we try to shelter our kids from hard experiences when in reality, and I'm not saying beat your kids or kick them out of the house, but in reality, if you're there to coach, like you just said, and help them through those hard experiences, that's where they get mentally strong. That's where they build resiliency so that they're able to accomplish great things. Like every one of those young men are phenomenal young men. I've kept in touch with most of them, and they're phenomenal young men, and they're doing great things in the Navy SEAL teams. 2 of them right now are actually going to try out for, it's called Green Team, but they're trying out for SEAL Team 6 this next April. And so it's amazing to watch those kids progress in their careers and in their life and see them be successful at what they're doing. And it really is attributed back to as they were kids. They had hard things that happened, and they made it through. And I think we can do that same thing. We can coach our kids, help them through those hard things, and that's where they're really going to succeed.
Yeah, I think you look at everything great you have in life, and it probably came through something hard.
For sure.
I look at this relationship right here. A year ago, we were sitting in a room about this size, but not with a producer.
Yeah, it was a hard day.
We went through some hard stuff to make this relationship become great.
Yeah.
And I look at all areas of my life, and I think about that a lot for my kids too. Is it's like, hey, you're gonna have to feel the pain, and it's hard as a parent to let them feel that pain.
Yeah.
So, well, I think we appreciate you coming down and making it work while you're in town this week.
Hope it was worth it.
It was absolutely worth it.
Yeah,
it's always a pleasure to spend time with you, and
love you both. You guys
love
are
you
amazing.
very much, and look forward to what's next.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.